Welcome to Cumberland Island National Seashore, one of more than 400 National Park Service sites across the nation. Cumberland Island is the largest barrier island along Georgia's coast. It sits just north of the Florida border. There are more than 50,000 visitors a year that board ferries and private boats to come out here and visit the island. They come and explore for the day some of our amazing cultural history sites, including our Dungeness Estate and Plum Orchard Mansion. They come out and they stay at one of our 5 designated campgrounds. Cumberland Island has more than 17 miles of undeveloped beach line to come and explore. We have 50 miles of hiking trail on the island and close to 10,000 acres of designated wilderness. The island is home to abundant wildlife, everything from bobcats to sea turtle nesting, manatees, and alligators and gopher tortoise. We have more than 300 birds that travel through here throughout the year seasonally. Many of our visitors will come. They will explore several of our historic sites like the Dungeness Mansion and Plum Orchard. Cumberland Island can be a very enjoyable place to come and visit, but it is a place you'll want to be prepared for. You can make reservations for camping and for ferry travel up to 6 months in advance. And when you arrive at the island, much of the island looks like what you see here. There are no shops, stores, or restaurants, so visitors will want to come prepared with everything that they would need for a day visit, including water bottle, clothes to be comfortable, food, and bug spray and sunscreen are always a good idea. We hope you'll get a chance to come out and explore Cumberland Island, and we hope to see you soon. So this is the Dungeness Estate here on Cumberland Island. This house that you see to my left was once called the grandest house south of Washington, D.C. on the coast of the United States. It was built by the couple Thomas Carnegie and Lucy Coleman out of Pittsburgh. When industrial monies allowed and they decided they wanted a retreat for them and their family from the Pittsburgh area, they picked a spot here on the south end of Cumberland Island to build their home. They built the mansion that you see over there in 1884. The pieces that are brick and stone work, all this was shipped down from the New England area and assembled down here in a matter of months. The brickwork and the stonework that you see on the house is part of the original structure. Any of the concrete looking tabby that is built around the walls and the sides of the building were all things that were added in the later years. The family built the house and began enjoying it in the winter of 85 and 86, though Thomas Carnegie passed away in that year. His wife Lucy continued to come down here and use this as one of her primary homes throughout her life. Lucy built several homes along the island way for her sons and daughters. The guests were welcomed out here to Cumberland Island and to come out and to enjoy what Dungeness had to offer them. If you were a visitor to Dungeness in the 1880s and 1890s, you would have been greeted at the dock on the side of the island. You would have been brought by carriage or car down the pathway you see behind me, lined with oak trees and tall magnolias. You would have been greeted in front of the mansion at that carriage step, where you would have seen a large house, over 35,000 square feet by the time they were done building on it. Blue and black marble floors, cathedral glass windows on the first floor. You would have been greeted at the mansion, taken inside where you could have enjoyed one of the large dining room or sitting areas on the first floor. Had a second floor that was home to the apartments for Lucy and Thomas and their 9 children when they first moved out here to the island. So Dungeness Mansion was a perfect example of a Gilded Age mansion that was built in the late 19th century. As industrial wealth started to rise in industries like the railroad, oil, steel, some of these industrialists began to build homes that could showcase their fortune and provide an example of their status. And as you can see, Dungeness was a grand example of that. The family that was here, they built this at a time when there was not much development along the southern end of the coast here. So they had selected an area that was already well known for a plantation that had existed here, also having a mansion in this spot named Dungeness. When they began to build, it was so popular amongst people along the coast that when the newspapers printed what this house was going to look like and what features were going to be in it, they actually sold out of those newspapers and needed to reprint them. Everyone wanted to know what was happening over here on the south end of the island and what this home was going to look like. A trip to Dungeness would have been simple enjoyment. There was a full wait staff that would have been here to cater to you. As you were greeted into this entryway step, your baggage would have been taken around the side of the house and brought into the lower part of the building to be unloaded. Dumbwaiters could bring goods and baggage up and down throughout the house. So all of your time here at Dungeness, you would have been waited on hand and foot. At the time when you were ready to go out and venture through the island, there were stories that as the guests came out of the front entryway of the house, right out in front there would be lined up electric automobiles that would be there to greet them in the morning for them to take and go exploring. So I'm here on the back lawn of the Dungeness estate. You can see the backside of the mansion here would have had large porches that stuck out on the sides so that you could sit out and enjoy the beautiful view down to the marsh. The entire back lawn here was crisscrossed with walkways that were topped with crushed oyster shell. They would have shown light in the sunlight. You can also see there was a large working fountain that stood right here in the center of the lawn as well. Topiary hedges were lined along the back wall with large arches cut into them, so the whole landscape back here was manicured and kept to look nice and presentable. It was, after all, part of the estate, part of the overall impression that the family was given. Now, life out here on Cumberland, it was challenging. Even with those sorts of means, it meant that the family that owned this home, they tried to provide as much as they could for the people that lived here, visited, and for the workers that were taking care of this place. So just over the wall to my left, there was a large garden area that was separated from the marsh area down there. They would have raised vegetables, fruits, cut flowers to decorate in the home. And of course, all of this landscape, the grounds, the gardens, and everything would have required a tremendous workforce. Simply to operate a home like Dungeness, to wait on the people, to change the linens, to ensure that the meals were prepared and cooked on time would have involved a terrific staff. So Dungeness was a place that would have employed perhaps as many as 200 employees at different times of year. The small white building that's right over in front of me, that was a spot known as the Carriage House. That is the oldest standing structure on Cumberland Island. It was here at the time when the Carnegies built the Dungeness Mansion, and they actually changed that to be the office building for the estate manager. It was his responsibility to know all he needed to know about caring for the estate, as well as to hire all the individuals that worked out here. In that building, they would have kept the money in a check printing machine and ledgers that would have documented all the workers' time. The workers that came here to Cumberland, they would have traveled over on a Monday morning. They would have reported to their certain areas of service. They would have kept track of all of their days spent out here and their hours spent out here and any money that they had spent as well. And then on Saturdays before heading to the mainland, they would have boarded a ferry to travel back over. And then at the end of each month, those ledgers in the Carriage House, they would have been calculated out. The workers would have taken their payroll in there, then they would have been paid for their month's service. The estate of Dungeness would have been something that would have been welcome along the coast of Georgia and North Florida. If you lived here in the 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s, there were only so many ways that you could make a living. It may have been fishing or agriculture or cutting timber. A spot like Dungeness would have offered employment that would have meant that you could care for your family. You would have been responsible for spending quite a bit of time out here on the island, away from your family, especially while the Carnegies were here visiting, but it meant that you could have provided a nice housing and food and education to your family over on the mainland. We hear from the sons and daughters of the people who worked out here at Cumberland Island, worked at the Dungeness estate, and they say that their parents, it was known that they worked out here. It carried a certain amount of prestige. They learned skills out here at Cumberland Island that they could take to other areas and apply while working at the Jekyll Island Club to our north, or down at the Flagler areas in St. Augustine to our south. It would have been a means of gainful employment for them. The foundation you see behind me is what remains of the recreation building. Of all the buildings here at the Dungeness estate, this one tells you most why the family was coming to Cumberland to visit. If you look in the center of the building, you'll see a rectangular raised piece with some white tile along the side. That was their indoor heated swimming pool. Above that would have been a gymnasium piece with trapeze and things, monkey bars that you could climb across. In the back of this building was a squash court where they could play games. There was also another separate room that was a bit of a lodge where they had a billiard table and a player piano. This would have been the place where you could have come to enjoy yourself a little bit. And that's what visiting Cumberland Island was for the family. It was a time where they could come down and stay with family and friends for an extended period of time. They could enjoy things like the games and the swimming here at the recreation building. They may have played tennis out on the lawn here in front of the building. There was a 9-hole golf course that was here at one point. They may have also taken advantage of being surrounded by the water resources. If you look over the wall just down in front of me, you'll see the boathouse that sits along Beach Creek. Several small boats could be taken out from there. They could go fishing, hunting for oysters, maybe even just walking over the beach to go swimming. But by far the biggest and most cherished of their recreational opportunities on the island was hunting. The entire family was known for their fondness of hunting, it seems, and they would travel out to other areas to hunt bird, deer, turkey, you name it. And so this was really a place where the family would come to enjoy the outdoors, enjoy the time with friends and relatives, and that hasn't changed too much. Our visitors today that come to Cumberland Island, they still come out here for some of that same enjoyment. They come to swim at the beach, they come to paddle and boat around the water's edge, and they come out here to enjoy visiting places like Dungeness and peering back into the history of the island. We don't have a golf course anymore, so that's one thing you won't be able to do when you come out here to Cumberland. So the large white house to my left is known as the Grange. It was a house that was built here on Cumberland for the estate manager, a gentleman by the name of William Page. Page was a Harvard graduate who was originally hired to be the tutor for the children of the Carnegies who would be staying out here on the island. As the children grew older and as the operation here at Dungeness grew bigger, well, Lucy, she needed somebody that could manage the books and the estate for her. So she had Page step up and be that superintendent. She had lent him the money and give him the spot to build this home, and he became a trusted member of the family. After Lucy passes away in 1916, Page continued to live out here and was actually forgiven the debt that he owed for the house. When he finally passes away in 1921, he was laid to rest in the family cemetery here on Cumberland Island, showing just how cared for he was. If you look over here to my right, you'll see 4 concrete pedestals. That would have been where the feet of the water tower would have been stabilized. The water tower stood 120 feet high. It was the tallest thing out here on Dungeness's landscape. Now the pressure from the water was not actually needed for all the fixtures in the house. Any of the faucets that they had in there, they had enough groundwater pressure to be able to run those. What was essential to have that water tower for was that they had installed an elevator in the house, and it was the pressure of the water that was used to raise and lower the elevator in Dungeness. So we're here in the support area for the Dungeness estate. While the house and the grounds that the family would have used were on one side of the tree line, several buildings were built on this side of the tree line to house all the workers and the necessary things that were needed to run a place like that. So the buildings that surrounded me were all part of this one estate. Straight in front of me is an old laundry facility that was used obviously to take care of the linens and the family wash, as well as the laundry for the workers that were out here. Next to me here, this very large building, this is the Carriage House. Now, Cumberland was home to numerous stables that were out here. This one would have been the largest one at one point. The stable itself would have held some 50 horses. Inside the carriage house here, you would have had not only horse-drawn carriages, but also gas-powered automobiles and electric automobiles as well. The top floor of it was apartments where some of the workers could stay. Now, staying at Dungeness had its comforts as well, some of them that were right on the cutting edge of what technology could provide at the time. Behind me here, these 2 large brick pedestals would have been where 2 big generators stood. The buildings here at Dungeness in the house, at one point, they introduced electric generators to the island, and it ran DC current to all the buildings that were out here. So they also had to hire people to come down, set these machines up, and teach the staff how to run them. And there were several staff that would have stayed overnight in this building in order to keep the machines operating. Over to my right-hand side, there are several more buildings along the tree line. All the workers that were out here would have stayed here from Monday through Saturday. They would have had barracks buildings that were over there. So all barracks that were here were separated by gender, men and women staying in separate buildings. But because of the time it was in our country, they were also separated by race. So some buildings were for white workers, some buildings were for black workers. Also, we have the commissary, which is over through the tree line where the workers could go and purchase things they needed, and a kitchen that was there as well. You had a woodworking shop at the far corner and a blacksmith shop just for administering to what they needed on the island. You also had beyond the far tree line a dairy barn that could process 40 cows at a time, and fresh bread, fresh milk Fresh meat would have been delivered to the houses daily. They even had an ice machine in here in the later years that could have provided refrigeration and could have frozen large blocks of ice. At the time, it would have been even fancier to have chilled meals than it would have been to have a hot meal, because anybody can light a fire, but not everybody could have ice made right at their house. So Dungeness Estate required so many workers that several buildings had to be built in order to house them, and also just for all the operations that they needed. This area right here actually had the nickname Lucy's Village for a little while because Lucy Carnegie, who owned the Dungeness Estate, had built so many buildings over here to house those employees and the operation themselves. Some of these buildings, we learn the stories of the people that worked out here. Many of them, like the large barracks that's in front of me or to the side of me, they would have been used for people who were out here while the family was visiting. They would have been employed from, say, October through May each year, because it is, of course, more comfortable to visit here during the fall, spring, and winter months than it is to be out here during the summer. But some of the employees here were required to stay here year-round, including the gentleman that lived in this house right here. His name was Sam Bealey Jr. His father had worked for the Dungeness Estate, and so Sam had come up and worked here very early on, and by the time he got older and his father had retired, Sam took on the duties of being the dairy manager and also overseeing much of the operation throughout the year. His children have talked to us about what it was like when Sam was working out here, and they say when they came over to visit their father, they never got to eat dinner with their father in the house. And that's because one of Sam's responsibilities was to eat over there in the kitchen with all the workers to be sure that the food was good enough for those workers.